Peter Valley, FBAMaster.com here. You guys, I would dare say this video and the accompanying article is probably my greatest contribution to the Amazon book selling world, period, in what, a dozen years of talking and writing about this stuff. It's what I call the 4 laws of book value. In other words, how you can see profitable books everywhere without relying on your scanner. This is a video for the real sellers that appreciate the art and science of book selling and not just looking at books as like some widget to flip online, but they actually want to ascend in the craft of book selling, which will consequently translate obviously into more profits. I'm going to give you X-ray vision that will allow you to see profit everywhere through what I call the 4 laws of book value. And I'm going to get into what all this is in a second. So who's this video for? Number 1, this is for sellers that currently right now are scanning everything. You go into a source and you're just scanning everything, no matter what. You're what we call a scanner monkey, okay? Or number 2, this is for sellers who don't scan everything, but you're still mostly guessing when it comes to what books you give attention to versus the ones you pass on. You don't really have a refined formula. You're just sort of like, that looks profitable, that doesn't look profitable, but you don't really have a process. Now, of course, this video is not going to apply to you if you're doing sourcing entirely like wholesale. This is only for sellers who are assessing the value of books before they acquire them. Does that make sense? Okay, so fundamentally, I'm going to teach you how to make more money in less time. Now, think about this for a second. If you scanned every book in a source of 10,000 books, it would take you about 8 hours. That's assuming 3 seconds per book. So we're going to get that down to 10 minutes through the 4 laws of book value, and I'm not kidding. Now, some of this, I can only teach this up to a point. A lot of this is just going to come from experience, but I'm going to shoot you past the learning curve pretty dramatically by the end of this video, okay? So we're going to tell you to get more profit in less time. So why is this mandatory? Learning this stuff, learning the 4 laws of book value and this X-ray vision concept is mandatory because number 1, you rarely have time to scan everything. Even if you do have time to scan everything, that comes with an opportunity cost. So you go into a source of 10,000 books, you're going to spend hours scanning everything. But even though theoretically you get through all the books, what could you have done in those 3, 4, 5, 8 hours? You could have visited 5 other sources, right? So even if you have time to scan everything, you don't want to scan everything because it comes with an opportunity cost. There are some sellers that extract 5 times more profit from a source than others. What I'm about to teach you is the secret to those sellers. We all know what to do, right? We all have the same access to basically the same information, the same tools, the same sources, right? Everyone knows what to do. So why do some sellers have vastly different results than others? The answer largely is what I'm going to cover in this video. Value is not random. This is the most important concept you've got to understand before we go forward is if you got 2 books and you got a book in one hand that's worth $50 and a book in the other hand that's worth $5, it is not merely randomness, not just the randomness of the gods that one is worth 50, one's worth 5. There are actually principles that create the value in the $50 book that are absent in the $5 book. Okay, so you have to accept at least this basic premise before we go forwards, or otherwise none of this is going to make any sense to you, okay? It's driven by laws. I'm going to teach you what those laws are. So why do you need to understand the 4 laws of book value? Number 1, you can never scan every book, right, as we covered. Number 2, you really don't want to scan every book, also covered. Number 3, over 99% of books, actually it's more like 99.7% of books, cannot be sold on Amazon for over $10 as an FBA seller. It's impossible. So they're simply not worth money. They're not profitable. So how do you focus on that tiny, tiny fraction of a percent? That's what we're going to cover here. Profits are directly tied to the speed and quality of your scanning, period. Okay? It's how quickly you can do it and how the quality of the decisions you make when you're scanning. That's what determines your profit. And these 4 laws of book value are going to dramatically increase the quality and the speed of your sourcing. Number 5, value is not accidental. There are patterns. It's not just about titles. People think it's about titles. Oh, this book is worth money. This title is worth money. And you memorize it. It's not about the titles. That's an amateur move. And it's not even about the categories. People go, oh, well, business books tend to be worth money. That's an amateur move. It's about the principles that underlie these things. And that's what we're going to cover, okay? Now, I'm going to make a bold statement here. I'm going to say that every single book, 100% without exception, again, bold statement, that you sell for $12 to $15 or more as an FBA seller, 1 or more of these 4 laws apply, without exception. That means that literally this is not just like, oh, these are things that contribute to value. I am giving you the entire sort of matrix. Like I'm giving you the grid here of everything that drives value in books. Okay, that's how powerful this stuff is. And there's this concept that I coined this term because I didn't know what to call it, but pre-scanning. And pre-scanning is this concept where you assess the likelihood that a book has value in a microsecond that informs your decision of whether to scan a book or not scan a book. Okay? In other words, if you're not pre-scanning, all you're doing is just scanning everything. And as we covered, that's a disaster. So pre-scanning is like The form that you use, it's subconscious, totally subconscious, right? 99 point whatever % of all thought processes happen in the subconscious mind, right? That your subconscious does most of the heavy lifting. So I'm not talking about looking at a shelf of books and sitting back and being like, okay, I see that spine, that book that's blue. Let me go ahead and just run that through my Rolodex of concepts and see how it fares out before I decide to pick the book up. No, at that point, you may as well just pick up the book and scan it because you've already spent 3 seconds, right? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about your subconscious mind going, okay, there's a shelf of books with 100 books here. What are, in a microsecond, the 5 books that I should pay attention to that have a high likelihood of value or higher than average, and what are the 95 I should avoid? And this can be learned. This absolutely, and that's what this whole video is about, okay? So that's what pre-scanning is. Now, here are the 4 laws. I'm going to go through them quickly, and then I'm going to go through them in depth, okay? You want to write this down, and I'm not kidding. This is one of the more valuable things you're probably ever going to learn, and I'm not aware of any other video or article or anything on the entire internet or anywhere in the world that covers what I'm about to cover, okay? Law number 1 is the law of recency. Law number 2 is the law of relevance. Law number 3 is the law of necessity, and law number 4 is the law of irrational passion. And yes, I made up all of these. I named them. I came up with the concept. I get to do whatever I want. I decided to name these. If you don't like the names, it's unfortunate. I've already patented this. I've trademarked it. I have etched it into stone inside the pyramids. You cannot undo this. These are the 4 laws. Immutable forevermore. Okay, so before I define each of these, let's get this out of the way really quickly. FBAmastery.com. You guys, everything you see here on the screen, everything. It's over 600 pages of free material. You can download all of it right now at FBAmastery.com. Hit the link below. You can find the link in the comment and in the description of this video. Number 2. You got to subscribe to the YouTube channel. It is actually legally mandatory. Trump has been discussing this a lot lately. You might have noticed in some of his press conferences. He's making a lot of threats against people that don't subscribe to the FBA Master YouTube channel. I think he's going a little bit overboard. Like, I'm going to talk to him about it, don't worry. But he's talking about putting people in camps, military action. I think it's a little bit zealous. Directionally correct, but a little bit zealous. So I'm going to have a talk with him. But anyway, you can avoid all this in case he does actually follow through on his plans. Just hit the button and subscribe, and you can avoid potentially a fate in a camp. You guys, NeuroPrice. You need a repricing tool. Non-negotiable if you're an Amazon seller. I don't care what your level of inventory is. You need a repricing tool. I built the best one, and I built this because I was burned by existing repricing tools. Your current repricer is doing things the old-fashioned way. I call them retro repricers. They can't do what NeuroPrice can do. NeuroPrice allows you to reprice your inventory in a way that is literally impossible with your current repricer, including raising prices and everything else. Go over to neuroprice.io, hit the link that says why NeuroPrice is better, and you'll see all the reasons we're better than your current repricer. And lastly, there's an article version of this video at FBAmaster.com. I go a little more in depth than I'm able to in this video, so hit the link if you want to go deeper in the subject. Okay, you guys, the 4 laws of book value. Are you ready? Number 1 is what I call the rule of recency. Now, why did I arrogantly, with massive hubris, put an image of my own book on the slide as an example of the rule of recency? Well, actually, this is a book, as of the time I'm recording this, is not even out yet. So there's no book for which the rule of recency applies more than it does to this book. But let me explain what the rule of recency is. The rule of recency is this. The more time that elapses after a book is published, the more time there is for the market to get flooded with a glut of used copies. The more time for people to lose interest in a book, so demand can go down. And so you have demand that goes down, prices go down. So the more recent a book is, the more likely it is to be valuable. So what that means is a book can become valuable for no other reason other than it just simply came out recently. It's just a newer book. So none of the other 4 laws may apply. And in fact, all the 4 laws may be working against the book being valuable, which will cause this book to plummet in value relatively quickly. But what this means is when you see a book, you can identify by the design, okay, this book came out in the last few years. You guys ever notice, like, you'll see this if you process lots of books, it's like there's just design trends. Like, you can look at a book and, like, not know for certain, but with a reasonable degree of certainty, like, okay, this book was definitely published in the last 5 years. Like, it's got that theme, that design scheme that didn't really exist a few years ago, right? So you should be able to pick up on these patterns and identify pretty quickly, like, okay, well, this is a recently published book. And it's not just about looking at the book and going, oh, the condition is new. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the design. And it's pretty easy to spot. Once you process a few thousand, you start to, like, pick up very quickly, oh, this is a newer design scheme. And so oftentimes you'll find a book for which that is the only reason it is valuable, is that it came out recently and there hasn't been enough time for the market to get flooded with used copies. And so the value stays high. So that's what we call the rule of recency. Okay, the second reason a book might be valuable is what I call the rule of relevance. Now take a look at this image here. Look at this book. The rule of relevance definitely applies to this book, as I'll explain to you right now. So the rule of relevance is basically this. Books that provide value that does not diminish over time. When you've got a subject matter that is as relevant now as it was the day it was published, even if it was published 100 years ago, that is the rule of relevance does apply, and there's a high likelihood that book has value. And this actually applies to very few books. There are very few books that are as relevant now as they were when they came out, and that for whom their relevance does not diminish dramatically over time. Now, an extreme example of this is like a book about some celebrity that just nobody knows about anymore, or like a travel guide, like a guide to Spain in 1993, not relevant, right? These are extreme examples. Or like Directory of Plastic Surgeons for the year 2003, right? Obvious examples of books that have for which the relevance decreases dramatically as time goes on. But there are a few categories of books that, again, for whom their relevance does not diminish. One I've talked about before, which is the example on the last slide here, is math books. Math is timeless. This is on the extreme other end of the spectrum. A book that is like truly timeless. Math never goes obsolete, ever. So you've got a book on an obscure mathematical formula like this book right here. It is literally as relevant now as it was then, and not 1 degree less. And that is a strong recipe for value. Rule number 3. Number 3 reason a book is valuable. And by the way, hopefully it's clear, you guys, that the more of these that apply to a book, the more likely it is for a book to be valuable. Like the absolute like peak of book probability of book value is going to be a book that was published recently on a subject that is timeless, and for which the rule of necessity applies. We'll get to that in a second. I don't want to spoil number 4 either. But where all these apply, it's almost 100% certainty the book is valuable. Almost 100%. And the more that apply, the more likely it is for the book to have value. Okay, the rule of necessity. Take in the book that's on the screen here, as weird as it may look to you. The rule of necessity applies to this book. Okay, so what is the rule of necessity? Books for which there is no other substitute in the world. A book on a subject matter for which, if you want the knowledge that is contained in that book, you must buy that book. Now, when you think about it, there are actually very few books in the world for which this applies. Like, it's a very small percentage, which is why a very small percentage of books are actually worth money. Usually, when there's a book, there's probably multiple other books on that subject. There's like 50 million books in the Amazon catalog, right? It's very uncommon for you to look at a book and go, there's no other book in the world on this exact subject. But when that does apply, or when there are very few other books that cover that subject, the fewer the better, the fewer the more likelihood the book has value, then the rule of necessity applies. These are books for which you can just look at them and go, okay, this book is so specialized, it's on such a niche subject, that it is likely or impossible that no other book in the world on this subject exists anywhere. And look at this book I just showed you, Poor Man's James Bond. It's basically a book on different recipes and how to do a bunch of crazy illegal stuff. And without going into all the subject matter, you can just look at this book and look at the cover and be like, all right, I'm pretty sure there's no other book in the world that's going to cover what's in this book. And so again, this is the kind of book where I would look at it and go, probably better than 50% likelihood this book has value. Principle of book value number 4 is what I call the rule of irrational passion. This is probably, you can't really say what the biggest driver of value is, because I don't want to say they're all equal, but anyway, this is a huge one. The rule of irrational passion. Look at this book right here, this cover. The Children of the Matrix. The subtitle, if you can't read it, is How an Interdimensional Race Has Controlled the World for Thousands of Years and Still Does. Now, you could probably look at this and go, rule number 3 applies. In other words, there's probably no other book in the world on this subject. But this is an even enhanced version of the rule of necessity, in that the rule of irrational passion says that anytime the audience for a book is not just passionate about the subject, but absolutely out of their minds bonkers passionate, like freakishly, frighteningly passionate, the book most of the time will have value. Okay, so these are books for a small and what I call irrationally passionate audience. Now, here's the thing. The key detail here is not just don't focus on the irrationally passionate part. Small is a necessary element here. Now, I want you to think about a book that has an irrationally passionate audience that is not small. An example might be yoga. People that are into yoga are often irrationally passionate. But guess what? I would never look at a yoga book and go, oh, this book is almost definitely worth money. Why? Because there's bazillions of yoga books. And the reason there's bazillions of yoga books is that there are bazillions of people who do yoga. So they might be irrationally passionate, but it's not a niche subject. Or you might just pick like a presidential candidate like Trump. People are irrationally passionate about Trump. That's not a small, it's like over 50% of the country, right? if we go by the voting record. So I would never look at a book on Trump and go, oh, this book probably has value. Do you guys see what I'm saying here? So small and irrationally passionate, that is a huge recipe for value. So again, the book I just showed you, it's a book on the secret reptilian race that's controlling the planet, right? Irrationally passionate. Another example would be like if you guys are, did any of you grow up in the 80s, or am I just the only one? A history of of collectible garbage pail kids. Another book I saw. I look at that book and I'm just like, oh yeah, like this is an irrationally passionate fan base for this book. So of course it's probably gonna be worth money. So anytime you have small and irrationally passionate, that is a recipe for value. Now, I might have made some enemies with this video, or at least obliterated some paradigms here, because most people that are, I don't mean amateur like in a disparaging way, most people that are inexperienced in this business think in terms of titles or categories. They think in terms of profit being assigned by title or profit being assigned by category, right? I used that example earlier. It's like, oh, business books tend to be valuable, or yoga book, or whatever, like, or this title tends to be valuable. Forget those two things. Yes, it's good to know generally like what categories tend to be worth money like slightly more than average. That's not a bad thing, but the next level of this is thinking in terms of principles, and these are the 4 laws of book value. And I think as I've been teaching this, hopefully you've been looking back, been like, or maybe even you got a stack of books like on next to your computer that you're playing a list, and you're looking at the spines. You're like, oh yeah, wow, like the rule of the 4 laws of value, like one or more of these applies to every single book that I've sold recently or I'm about to list. And I think if you looked, you'll find that is the case. That's how powerful this stuff is. Okay, you guys have a 4-part mission. Are you ready? Mission number 1, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Do it immediately. Trump will put you in a camp. That's not my words. That's Trump's words. Subscribe immediately. Mission number 2, head to fbamaster.com. Link is below this video. Get everything you see here, over 500 pages of free stuff, 600 pages of free stuff. You can build a whole business off of what I give away for free. Mission number 3, subscribe to the free trial to NeuroPrice. It is the best repricer. I built it myself to be the best repricer because I was so infuriated with all the limitations of existing tools. So hit the link below, neuroprice.io. If you're on the fence, it's free trial, by the way. If you're on the fence, click the tab that says why NeuroPrice is best, and it will be impossible for you to not sign up at that point because you'll be cornered with the fact that the current repricer you're using is obsolete. Okay, mission number 4, take what you learned in this video and actually apply it. Go make money with it. That's why I made this video. I didn't make it to be entertaining because God knows I'm not entertaining. I made this video for you to apply it, make money with it. That's it, you guys. This is Peter Valley signing off, and I'll see you in the next video.